an Orthodox,
Sorry.
her identity as an Orthodox woman and feminist shows that a woman may indeed possess both attributes. Married and the mother of a toddler girl, Yogi strives to make Jerusalem and Israel more tolerant places for her daughter's generation and beyond. In her free time, Yogi volunteers for Not Standing Aside, and Yogi, you'd have to do the Hebrew on that, a nonprofit which helps women once involved in prostitution with their immediate needs and avenues for healing. Ladies and gentlemen, Yogi Rappaport.
So thank you very much. And I apologize ahead of time if for those of you who already heard me, if it gets a little bit too boring. I'll apologize the second time since that biography was written. My toddler daughter became 4 and I'm a proud mother of another baby, 4 months old.
Oh,
So I'll update, I'll update my bio. So let me just give you a little bit more information about myself beyond what was written in the bio that Flu was reading so beautifully. For those of you who haven't seen Tina's background, Tina has the old city of Tzfat as her virtual background. So I was born in Tzfat, the artist quarter of Safed. And Tzfat is it's the mystical city. It's called the mystical city. It's a very peripheral city, a very Orthodox oriented city. So we have ultra Orthodox, we have secular, and we have Orthodox. And even if you're secular in Tzfat, you're very much Orthodox. You don't have a lot of options growing up in a small peripheral city where everyone at the end of the day is most likely the same. When I was turning 16, when I became a teenager, and of course wanted to rebel on my parents, I started feeling that what my parents were giving me in terms of religion was just not enough. Now, I loved and I still love religion, and I felt very much connected, but going to the synagogue and just sitting in the back and praying quietly and not being able to participate in an active way felt that something is missing. Going to school and having a service every morning, but not being able to read from the Torah or compose a minyan just felt wrong, and it felt that something's missing. So I didn't want to be secular because I believed in religion. I didn't want to be ultra Orthodox, but still, what other options do I have? I did not know what other options were out there. Tzfat, again. And then I joined the army. When I was 18, I joined the IDF, something that my school was very much not appreciative of. They thought that the IDF, the army, is not a place for young women. And suddenly, only when I was in the army, I finally was able to meet a variety of young girls, religious young girls in Oslo, and they showed me that religion and feminism can actually go well together. That it's not just ultra Orthodox, or secular, but there's a variety within religion, modern Orthodox, or even conservative and reform, names that I've heard in the back of my head, but I never really understood what it means. And suddenly I started falling in love. I started understanding that as a woman, as a religious woman, there is a place for me. There is a synagogue. There are places that that want me there, that want me to participate, that want me to be a part. And that's where I felt at home. I joined Women of the Wall's service for the first time around 2013, around the time that Women of the Wall were arrested. I'll get to it in a few minutes. And the first service was horrific. A lot of yelling, screaming, violence, but yet I was standing in the middle, and the harmony of the women surrounding me and just praying, even though people were yelling, screaming, and cursing them, made me understand that this is what I want. I want to be a part of this amazing group. And Women of the Wall, I always say, showed me my way back home to my Judaism, a Judaism that connects that allows me to connect and feel a part. So I'm going to show you a short video, and then I'm going to explain a little bit more about Women of the Wall, who we are, what we stand for, what our goals are, what we achieved, and what we're still fighting for. Please feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions. I will leave time, of course, at the end for anything you have to share with me or ask.
Put on your face, know your place. Shut up and smile, I could do that. 'Cause no one knows me, no one ever will. If I don't say something, take that dry blue pill. They may see a monster, they may run away, but I have to do this. I can't keep quiet. No, no, oh, I can't keep quiet. No, no, no one woman riot. Oh, I can't keep quiet. There'll be someone who understands. Must be someone who understands. There'll be someone who understands. Oh, I can't keep quiet. Oh, I can't keep quiet. I can't keep quiet. No, I won't keep quiet.
Okay, so let's dive in a little bit. The main question that we're going to ask ourselves throughout this presentation is, who owns the Western Wall? And more than that, why does someone own the Western Wall in Israel of today? But the deeper question that we're going to answer is, who owns Judaism here in Israel of 2021? Now, I'm going to take you back about 2,000 years ago, after the destruction of the Second Temple, when the Jews were exiled and scattered throughout the diaspora. And they were sitting on the rivers of Babylon and mourning Zion, mourning Jerusalem. And what kept them together as a group of Jews that we still know today was their hope that one day they will return back home to Zion, Judea, Israel of today, and their dream once again to be able to pray freely at the Western Wall, the Kotel. Now think about it. The first generation that was exiled, they of course remembered Zion as a whole. They remembered Masada, they remembered Jerusalem, they remembered Yavne, they remembered everything. The second generation, the third generation. But what happened later? They only heard stories, and they only knew about the Western Wall, the only remnant that survived after the destruction of the Second Temple. And they prayed to return back to the Kotel, to the Western Wall. Their hope, their desire, their dream is what kept them together and is what kept that dream alive. And women today in 2021 still have that same simple dream. Once again, to be able to pray freely at the Western Wall according to our tradition. Women of the Wall is a group of women from all denominations. One of the most amazing things about this group is the fact that we broke the walls between us, between the denominations. We have Orthodox women, such as myself, reforms, such as Anat Hoffman, the woman who founded Women of the Wall and is still the chair of board, conservative, her vice chair. We broke the walls between men and women. We have about 10% of our supporters are male who join us at the Western Wall, who say this is not just a women's struggle. This is not just a feminist struggle. We too support what you do. So women from all walks of life, from different ages, different denominations, we gather together once a month on Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the Hebrew month, at the women's section of the Western Wall, and we pray. Just like anyone else, when goes to the wall, we pray. We pray and we demand that women too will be able to pray freely according to their tradition. Now, it sounds kind of silly that women in Israel, Jewish women in Israel, have to fight for such a cause. And I promise you, we have 4 goals. Very simple. We call it the 4 T's. The first T is tefillah, to be able to pray freely, out loud. I don't know when you were able to visit the Western Wall lately, but when you go to the Western Wall, you go to the men's section, you walk in and you hear noise. You hear men praying. They'll grab men into a tefillah to help conform a minyan, singing, dancing. When you walk into the women's section, it's mostly quiet there. Women pray silently. But when women of the wall come to the Western Wall, we come as a large group of 200, 300 women, and we want to pray out loud. With the talit, it's our second goal, the tefillin, the phylacteries, and our main struggle until today is the Torah, to be able to read from the Torah scroll at the Western Wall. So just think for a minute about the absurd of our struggle. Women of the Wall was founded 33 years ago. I'll let you in on a little secret. I'm 32. Next month, I'm going to turn 32. I was born exactly a year after this organization was established. And in the first year, the women who founded Women of the Wall, they always said, we're going to go to the Western Wall every month, and we are going to fight for Yochi and her generation, to be able to pray freely at the Western Wall. So Yochi can have her bat mitzvah, if she wants to, at the Western Wall, reading from the Torah with no problem. Unfortunately, 33 years later, I'm sitting in front of you today and saying, not only did I not have a bat mitzvah at the Kotel, but still today, 32 years later, I will not be able to celebrate my birthday reading from the Torah at the Western Wall. And if you ask me, why do I do it? Why do I go to the Western Wall every month when women surround me, when men surround me and yell and threaten and even use physical violence against me? For my daughters and their generations. For them, for your grandchildren, your daughters, for them to be able to go to the Western Wall, the place that we turned into a holy site. What's so beautiful about the Western Wall, and that's the reason that I fight for the Western Wall, is that not God turned it into a holy site, but it's us, the people. After 2,000 years, many generations praying to return to the Western Wall, we turned the Western Wall into the symbol of the Jewish people, not only in Israel, but across the world, across the diaspora. It's our symbol. And we're fighting for women to be able to pray freely at the symbol of the Jewish nation. So I do it for my daughter's generation, and I do it for your grandchildren, your daughter's generation. And the absurd is that Israel was established for the whole purpose of Jews to be able to be Jews in Israel, to practice or not practice Judaism according to their tradition. After so many years of Jews all over the world having to hide their Judaism, and we're talking about Arab countries, Holocaust, the Spanish Inquisition, anywhere basically, Israel was established to put an end to that story. And yet again, Israel of modern times, women have to fight for their right to pray at the Western Wall. To the left are the paratroopers of 1967 who liberated the Western Wall. Those paratroopers turned to us at the right a few years ago and joined our struggle, saying, "You women of the wall, you're the modern liberators of the Western Wall." Because when we fought for the Western Wall, we did not imagine that it's going to be conquered once again by a small, zealot group from our people, from the Jewish nation. So if in 1967, a group of men with helmets liberated the Western Wall, today, modern days, a group of women with a talit and a Torah are liberating the Western Wall once again. And now we're going to return to the first question I asked you. Who owns the Western Wall? What's the problem here? Why do we have to liberate the Western Wall? Who are we liberating it from? And the answer is very frustrating. After 1967, when the Western Wall returned into Israel's hands, a small group of Jews from the chief rabbinate, a small religious institute, turned to the chief rabbinate. They turned to the government of Israel and they said, "Okay, who is going to own the Western Wall?" And they voluntarily offered that they will look over, they'll control the Western Wall. And they had a great reason. They said, "Look, the Western Wall is a sensitive site. It's a religious site. We are a religious institute. Let us look over the Western Wall, the holy site." So the government of Israel handed the keys to the holy site to the chief rabbinate, a small zealot group within our people. Without realizing, little by little, you have that dividing mechitza, the dividing separation. It wasn't there until 1972, kind of. And little by little, it became the divider where women cannot see anything that happens at the men's section. If a grandmother wants to watch her grandson read from the Torah at his bar mitzvah, she has to stand on a plastic chair. When lighting the menorah, the Hanukkah candles at the men's section, women cannot participate. Women basically cannot take any active role at the Western Wall. They cannot sing out loud. They cannot participate in any ceremony that happens there, a Memorial Day, any army ceremony that happens, that occurs at the Western Wall. Women cannot participate. The chief rabbinate appoints what's called the Kotel rabbi. And the Kotel rabbi is like the prime minister of the Western Wall. He owns the Western Wall. He controls the Western Wall. He has his own police, the ushers of the Western Wall, and they get their orders from him, only from him. The police, the Israeli police, cannot interfere with anything that happens there. We tried. 33 years ago, when the former rabbi of the Western Wall understood that there is this obnoxious group of women that are coming to the Western Wall month after month and praying in a way that's challenging his way of praying, the rabbi of the Western Wall he put out a new law, because he's the prime minister and he can do that. And this new law says that one may not lead a religious ceremony that contradicts local custom and hurts the feelings of the worshipers. Meaning no one can pray in a way that goes against the rabbi's way. The rabbi was Orthodox, of course. The current rabbi is ultra-Orthodox. And he turned the Western Wall into a synagogue, an ultra-Orthodox synagogue. And in their synagogue, in the rabbi's synagogue, women cannot participate. They cannot sing out loud because men cannot hear women singing. You know that? Because their voice is sexual. So rather asking men not to, if men don't want to hear women singing, don't listen, but they demand that women simply don't perform, don't sing out loud. So we, of course, are the ones who suffer. Women cannot wear a talit. They cannot connect to Judaism with the beautiful Jewish items, the rituals, the tefillin, reading from the Torah. Because if they do so, even though that it's according to halacha, it's the Jewish, the Orthodox law, it hurts their feelings because it's against their custom, it's against their way. If you violate this law, by the way, you can go to jail for 7 years, or pay a 10,000 shekel fine, $3,000 fine. For what? For being a Jewish woman or a Jewish man who does not pray according to the Orthodox way in the place that we all turned into a holy site. So our struggle takes place at the Kotel, but it only reflects on a few of the bigger issues taking place in Israel today. And the first one is discrimination against women in the public sphere. I'm sure that the discrimination is something that you suffer from in the States as well. We suffer from it a lot in Israel nowadays. The discrimination against women in the public sphere basically started with signs, as you can see in front of you, signs in different Haredi, Old Orthodox neighborhoods that ask women if they can please dress in a way that to dress in a certain way, meaning to be modest according to their eyes. So walking in Old Orthodox neighborhoods is sometimes uncomfortable if you're wearing trousers, if you're not, if your elbow is not covered, you can get someone might yell at you or even throw things at you. There are a few problems with these signs. The first one is it's illegal, because even though they live in those neighborhoods mainly, it's a public neighborhood. It does not belong to them. And signs like these offend women. More and more we see signs such as the sign in front of you, where women are physically marked off, erasing women from the public sphere because they're women, because they're not modest enough. Even women who are dressed properly, okay, even if they're dressed according to their dress code, they will erase women's faces because they simply don't want to see women in the public sphere. 2.5 years ago, when Israel was still in the cycle of elections after elections after elections, there was a big sign put up outside of Bnei Brak, which is an Old Orthodox city. And in that sign, you had all of the main candidates of the parties. 2 women back then were heads of parties, Tamar Zandberg and Orly Levy Abaxis. And overnight, they were simply marked off, not because they were undressed, not because they were provocative, simply because they were women. And they do not want to see women in the public sphere. And it goes back to the same reason that the rabbi claims against women singing at the wall. It hurts the feelings of the worshipers, of the public, of the people. So on Independence Day, when we still had performances, walking and watching public performances that were paid from tax money, and seeing man after man after man going up and performing, and seeing 0 women, and the excuse of the municipality, the Jerusalem municipality, was simply, look, you have a large religious audience that listens, that goes out to these performances. We don't want to offend them. Women singing in public events hurts the feelings of the public. So in the name of hurting their feelings, the religious people feelings, our feelings are hurt. But unfortunately, no one cares about our feelings. The second issue that Women of the Wall are raising, together with many other organizations, is the monopoly over religion that we have here in Israel. So even though Israel was never established as an Orthodox state, Israel is run like an Orthodox state. So we have the chief rabbinate, the organization, the institute that I explained a little bit about before. They not only control the Western Wall, they control every religious aspect here in Israel. Marriage divorce, kosher certificate for restaurants, conversion, burial, anything, you name it. And it affects everyone. It affects anyone and anything that we want to do in life, the chief rabbinate is used. And there's basically no way to get around them. If you have only one way to marry, the gay community cannot marry here. If one of the couple is not Jewish, according to the Orthodox law, they cannot marry here. Even someone from the priestly family, a Kohen, cannot marry a divorced woman or a convert, because it's not according to the Orthodox halacha, the Orthodox law. So I'm not here to argue with the Orthodox law, but I am here to say that there's more than one way to celebrate Judaism. There's more than one way to be a Jew, and Israel must acknowledge that and allow more than one way to live a Jewish life here in Israel. Secular, reform, conservative, liberal, modern Orthodox, and not force us to bow to this monopoly here. So once they control the Western Wall, which is the symbol of the Jewish people, it's the symbol of Israel, basically, they control anything else. Once we manage to liberate the Western Wall, we'll be able to liberate the rest of this monopoly. We'll be able to be liberated from it. The third issue that I'm sure concerns you more than anything else is bridging the gap between Israel and world Jewry. Because of the monopoly, because of the fact that only Orthodox Judaism is acknowledged here, it means that most Jews abroad who are not Orthodox, they are Reform or conservative or unaffiliated, their Judaism, or your Judaism, might I say, is not acknowledged here in Israel. Now, Israelis are so great, we call it shnorer, to go to someone and ask for help, ask for a favor, ask for anything. So can you please fund our organizations? Can you please fund Iron Dome? Can you please lobby for us? Can you please be here for us when BDS is happening? But we don't know how to give in return. We don't know how to say, okay, you give us so much, we want to give you something in return. We want to give back some of the love. We want to acknowledge your Judaism. We want to acknowledge your right here in Israel. What Women of the Wall are doing is to go out and say, we're here for you. We're here not just for our sake, we're here to bridge the gap. We're here to say the Kotel belongs to all of us. And I'm fighting not only for myself, not only for my daughter, I'm fighting for you as well. Because I want that when you return to Israel, hopefully B'karov, soon enough, you'll be able to go to the Kotel with no issue. You'll be able to walk in there and feel like you're wanted, that no one's asking you to pretend to be someone that you're not. I am going to stop for a minute just to see if you have any questions. Any questions? You can unmute yourselves. Okay. So between the years of 2010 to 2013, something happened, something switched in the struggle of Women of the Wall, and it was brought up to the attention of the media in Israel, but mainly abroad as well, and to the political opinion makers' attention. And what happened was that women started being arrested at the Western Wall month after month. The main reason was that we were wearing a talit and reading from the Torah at the Kotel, meaning we were violating the rabbi's way of praying. We were praying against local custom, and many women were arrested. I am going to share with you a short video clip, and then I'm going to return to my presentation. So 1 second.
hands on my shoulders, pressure to break or retreat at every turn, facing the fear that the truth had discovered. No telling how all this will work out, but I've come too far to go back now. I am looking for freedom, looking for freedom, and to find it cost me everything I have. Well, I am looking for freedom, looking for freedom, and to find it may take everything I hate.
I'm looking for freedom, looking for freedom, and to find it cost me everything I have. Well, I'm looking for freedom, I'm looking for freedom, and to find it may take everything I have.
Oh, not giving up has always been hard, so hard. But if I do things the easy way, I won't get far. Life hasn't been very kind to me lately,
Well,
but I suppose it's a push for moving on. In time, the sun's gonna shine on me nicely.
one day, yeah.
Something tells me good things are coming, and I ain't gonna not believe. I am looking for freedom, looking for freedom. And
So many women were arrested at the Western Wall for the whole purpose of just praying in a way that's allowed according to the Orthodox law, but it just does not line up with someone's way. And that someone happens to be the rabbi of the Kotel, who belongs to the chief rabbinate. In 2013, two very important and amazing things happened. And the first one was that the district court ruled that women of the wall, after being there for 25 years, are part of local custom. That's the beauty about custom, the beauty about tradition, that it can change, that it can develop. And women of the wall have been at the Western Wall for 25 years. We brought a new tradition. We made a new local custom. And today, legally, women can pray out loud. They can pray with the talit and tefillin. Legally, we won. We can even read from the Torah, our fourth goal, our fourth struggle. The problem is that the rabbi, and that's why it's still a struggle today, the rabbi of the Western Wall will not allow us to carry the item inside, nor will he allow us access to one of the 200 Torah scrolls that are at the men's section. So we can't bring one in. He won't give us access to his Torah scrolls. So what's left for us to do is to try and smuggle the Torah scroll in. Some months we manage, mostly we don't. But I will say it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to try and even smuggle a Torah scroll in. It's embarrassing to think that Israel of today forces me to do so, forces me to say, you know what, I'm smuggling a Torah in. It's wrong. It's just wrong. When I was pregnant with my older daughter, I went to the Western Wall, and when it was winter, and I was 6 months pregnant, so I was already showing. They body searched us at the time, thinking that we're carrying it in our body. And once they saw my huge stomach, they pulled me aside and said, okay, we have to check if that huge bump of yours is a Torah, because it looks suspicious. Now, a pregnant stomach and a Torah do not look the same. It does not look the same. But their meaning was to embarrass me, to say, you do not belong here. Your Judaism does not belong at our Western Wall. And the second thing that happened in 2013, that Prime Minister back then, Benjamin Netanyahu, was forced to find a solution for women of the wall. And he turned to Natan Sharansky, who at the time was the head of the Jewish Agency, to find a solution. And Natan Sharansky said, look, the solution is already there. At the Kotel, you have the men's section, 2/3 of the Western Wall, by the way. The women's section, look how small it is compared to the men's section. To the right, you have the Mughrabi Bridge that leads to Temple Mount. And to the right of the bridge, you have what's called Robinson's Arch, the egalitarian section. There is a small area that you can reach the Western Wall stones. It's called the Women of the Wall Porch. Supreme Court already ruled and said it's an embarrassment. You cannot call that a solution. This plaza was illegally built in 2010 as a compromise, as a solution for the reform movement. What Natan Sharansky said was very simple. Let's take this plaza that Women of the Wall called, rightfully so, the Sun Deck, and renovate it. How simple. Renovate it, make it look like it's an honorable plaza, make it accessible without all of the stairs, have a bathroom there, have access to Torah at that plaza. Make it look like the other plaza, like the Northern Plaza. We'll have the government fund it. The Northern Plaza, by the way, they get about 100 million shekels from the government a year for education, to bring students, soldiers, anyone who wants to for a tour. We're talking about a fraction of that. And most importantly, the people who are going to run the place are not connected to the chief rabbinate. It's not going to be the rabbi of the Kotel. It's going to be Women of the Wall, together with the reform and conservative movement. A pluralistic plaza. In 2016, after 3 years of negotiation, the government of Israel voted for this historical plaza. The government of Israel basically said, we're going to publicly acknowledge the liberal Jewish way. We're going to acknowledge a different way of celebrating Judaism. And this, they passed it in a government's decision. Unfortunately, what happened a few months later was that the ultra-Orthodox people, and later on there are two parties who were sitting at the Knesset at the time, pressured Prime Minister Netanyahu, saying, no way you're giving Women of the Wall this plaza. Because once we win the Western Wall, it means that we are acknowledged, our way of Judaism is acknowledged in a public site, in a government site, and they will not allow that. Because once we win the Kotel, they're going to lose the rest of their monopoly, like the domino effect. The Kotel is basically kind of like a train that drags everything with it. Their monopoly is going to go with the kashrut and the marriage and divorce and conversion, and they're afraid. They're afraid that people will understand that it's not only their way of Judaism, that there are many other ways, because their monopoly is very convenient for them. It equals money, it equals power, it equals jobs, and they simply will not allow that. Prime Minister Netanyahu went to AIPAC. I don't know if anyone remembers that. He stood in front of thousands of people at the AIPAC convention and said, I promise you the Kotel agreement. A few days later, he came back home and canceled the Kotel agreement, basically spitting in everyone's faces. For many years, for about 4 years, we turned to Supreme Court time after time, and Supreme Court turned to the government time after time saying, you promised, it's time that you do something with the Kotel. You promised them the Kotel agreement. We are finally at the stage where we actually have a functioning government, where we actually have a government that we can work with. So currently, we are strongly working with the government, with the current government, to bring the Kotel Agreement back to life. We were willing to compromise and leave the women's section. We understand that there are many women, Haredi, also Orthodox women there, who don't want to see us praying in a different way. They don't want to have to explain to their daughters that our way is also an okay way, an approved way. They're afraid. They're afraid of being exposed to different ways of celebrating Judaism. We acknowledge that, and we were willing to compromise and leave the women's section to this new plaza. We understand that this is going to be a solution for everyone, for all Jews all over the world. Sometimes we have trans people who turn to us and say, we don't know where to go to. This is a solution for everyone. This is a solution for Reform, conservative, women, anyone who secular, anyone who doesn't feel connected to the Northern Plaza will find a place at this new plaza. We just want that new plaza to feel like one that does not say this is for second-class Jews. So that's what we're fighting for today. And Rosh Chodesh Kislev, November 5th, we're going to have a march. We're going to march to the Kotel carrying 70 Torah scrolls. It is said, Shiv'im Panim LaTorah, there are 70 ways to interpret Judaism. And what we say is that our way, your way, is one of the 70 ways to interpret the Torah. We're going to march to the Kotel and say, something is still missing at the Kotel. Women can still not read Torah at the Western Wall, and demand that this would be a part of the negotiations, that women will be able to pray freely at the Kotel. Hopefully this will help. We work closely with this current government, and we do anything in our power to be able to bring this back, to bring this solution back. So this is my daughter. This is my older daughter. Her name is Gulan. She always begs me to join me at the Kotel, and I always refuse. Mainly because Rosh Chodesh is 7 in the morning, and because there's a lot of violence at the Kotel when we go. A lot of things. I don't want her to be exposed to that evil. The only time I allowed her to join me was on Purim, when it's quiet out. So she was Belle, the princess from Beauty and the Beast. I was Mrs. Potts. I was large back then. I was pregnant. And when she joined me, she was so thrilled, and she couldn't understand. She literally couldn't understand what the problem is. And sometimes I explain to her what happens when she watches the live stream with my husband. They watch the live stream every Rosh Chodesh. And she simply asks, why do people yell at mommy? Why do people there yell and not allow mommy to pray out loud? And it's very sad to say, no reason. They yell at me because they simply don't want me to have my voice heard. But we, women of the wall, are here to say that they claim that a woman's voice is sexual. For those of you who have the Women of the Wall talit, it says on it, Hashmi'ini et kolech, let me hear your voice, ki kolech arev u'marech naveh. Because your voice is melodic and your face is beautiful. We go back to the source, to King Solomon the Wise, who says, let me hear your voice, because our voice is melodic. And we have a voice for a reason, and it is to use it. Very simple. So thank you very much, Ruth and Flu, and all of you. It's amazing to be able to meet you, even when I'm sitting here in Jerusalem and you're sitting back at home in the US. I wish that I can meet you in person, and I still hope that I will. And as we say, B'shana ba'ah b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. If you have any questions, please feel free to open up your mic.
Any questions, anybody? Thank you so much. I can say that hearing you a second time was just as wonderful as the first time.
Oh, thank you.
Rabbi, Rabbi, you need to
But the
unmute.
third time has to be in person.
Okay.
No more Zoom.
You would love that.
Bye.
Yochi, thank you so much for being with us. And we will be thinking about you on November 5th on Rosh Chodesh Kislev and the 70 Torah Scrolls. And I wanted to know how we can help. What can we do here in America, in addition to visiting Israel and supporting, women of the wall? What can American Jews do to help you all with the new Israeli government, encourage them to allow that plaza to flourish?
So thank you, Rabbi. That's a great question. One of the main reasons that brought Netanyahu back then to realize that women of the wall are in fact an issue, because women of the wall started in 1988, and only in 2010 were we brought up to the public attention, is thanks to you, is thanks to North American Jews, understanding that our struggle is your struggle. We want recognition and you want recognition. We want a place at the plaza, you want a place at the plaza. Your lobbying helped us to bring this plan one time, and it's going to help us to bring it again. Pressure your federation to be a part of the Kotel agreement, to talk to any opinion maker that you know here in Israel. We were already promised by the government that our issue is going to be brought up to the government after they pass the budget. We haven't had a budget for 3 years now. They promised us. We were promised many things in the past. We do not believe any promises until they actually happen. Until we don't cut the ribbon to this new plaza, we're not going anywhere. We're still praying at the women's section. Ask your federation, or demand that your federation support only organizations that you support. You don't just need to support Israel. Israel is a variety. You have to choose and pick what organizations work for you. So ask if you support your federation, demand that your federation passes on your support to organizations that match your belief, your way of life. Of course, support Women of the Wall, support our important work. You can buy our items online. Please register to our newsletter, and then you can receive our updates. I'll send it to you, Ruth, or Flu. I'll send you our information. When you visit Israel, of course, visit around Rosh Chodesh. I can send you the links. I know that traveling is probably not going to happen in the next year or so, but travel around Rosh Chodesh so you can join us at the Western Wall. Write about us, talk about us, invite us to talk in other groups that you know, so we can bring our story to the public attention. If you have any connections to newspapers, we're always more than happy to write about our issue and just bring it up to the attention.
Yochi, I happen to be co-chair of the Israel Education Committee for WRJ.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, we had an event earlier where we had a trip to Israel and learned about women of the Knesset, of this new Knesset, and that is available online at the WRJ website. But if you have anything that you would like us to do through that Israel Education Committee, if you have suggestions for programs or speakers or anything, I'll put my email in the chat, and please contact me.
Yes, for sure, I will. Again, I think they need to know that people care. After Netanyahu canceled the Kotel agreement, many Jews in the US, as you probably know, have just departed away from Israel and said, we want nothing to do with Israel anymore. Israel is ignoring our demands and ignoring our needs, so we want nothing to do with it. And here's a chance to say, there is a government that is listening. There is a government who actually cares. We turn back to them time after time and say, it's not just our solution for us, it's a solution for Jews across the world, and they actually care about it. They need to know that people care. So if you can put in, if you know someone at the Knesset, if you know someone in the government, you of course should bring this issue up again and again and ask, what about the Kotel? If you're meeting with, you met with female Knesset members or ministers?
Sherry Robbins, who's a guy
Yeah, I
who
know
has
her.
led
She's
most of the,
amazing.
yeah. She did a program on it.
Exactly. So if you meet with them and you have time for questions, what are you doing to bring the Kotel agreement back? And that's where they know, okay, we need to go back to our party and understand this issue. We need to learn this issue. We care about this. If someone cares about this issue and we were asked this question and we were asked again, we of course need to learn this subject.
There's a question in the chat. What about appealing to donors to hold back their funding until this is accomplished? Do you think that's a good thing or not?
Look, I assume it depends who the donor is and who they donate for. I don't think the government will, again, I do think that this government, I'll phrase it in a different way. This government, their heart is in the right place. We're in strong contact with them. We work very closely with them. And of course, I do think that if you want, always donate to Israel. If you want to donate to Israel, donate, but direct your donations to organizations that support your cause as well. Meaning, don't just send your money into open air, direct it to places that you know that will promote your agenda, your what you believe in. And yes, I think that it is important to bring up the issue where you say we don't want to support because our agenda is not you don't care about us because you're not bringing up our agenda. But again, if you support an organization and they need your funding, I don't want to be the one who holds back on it. But of course that it needs to be hand by hand with the things that match your belief.
You know, our congregation is one that was started by women. There was, we had a lot of merchants here. This is not a Jewish neighborhood per se, but we had a lot of merchants here, and some women got together because they wanted a school for their kids. The women of Temple Sinai of Glendale have always been a strong force in this community and in the temple. And your cause, the cause, resonates with us. And it's hard for us to imagine being told no or to stand in the back of the bus in our terms. When
Literally it actually happened here. You still have buses that demand that women stand in the back of the bus for the whole purpose of modesty.
Right.
Any other questions?
Yochi, I just wanted to thank you so much in bringing this to our attention. I had done some work in the past with Eshel in regarding services to the elderly and did some work trips and was really dismayed at the fact that the ultra-Orthodox religion was playing such a larger part in all systems, not, and this wasn't aimed at women at all, in particular, or those issues, but I found lots of resistance, even when we talk about something as benign as helping the elderly, in terms of their communities and their influence on government and on other systems. And so it was very disheartening, but after hearing you now, I feel that there's a lot more to learn and there's a lot of hope and a lot of work happening for better equality. And I really appreciate all that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is a privilege being part of this revolution. And unfortunately, the next generation would have the privilege of not fighting this fight the same way that I was privileged to be born into a world where women can vote, women can go to universities, women can walk on the streets. Very simple, but back then it wasn't.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
What is the I mean, I know the Orthodox tend to rule a lot, but what are the numbers between the Orthodox compared to the more secular Jews in the country?
I challenge you to guess.
I mean, I'm thinking it's probably the more religious, but I don't know. I mean, it seems like there are a lot of, when we were there, it seems like there are a lot of secular Jews.
Yeah, my guess is it's very low compared to the majority.
12%.
How much?
I thought it was 10%.
10% is the religious or the secular?
No, the ultra Orthodox percent in Israel. And then you have the religious population, which is also another maybe 15 to 20%. The thing with the ultra Orthodox community that even though they're 10, 12% of the population, they grow fast, right?
Yeah.
So I'm 32 and I have 2 kids. My cousin who's ultra Orthodox and she's 27, she already has 4, so I'm way behind. So not only are they growing faster, they also vote 100% of them. Meaning the general population, I think the last time it was 69, and that was considered high. 100% of the ultra Orthodox vote, and then they have right now they have 13 seats at the Knesset. So they have an ultra Orthodox Sephardi party and an Ashkenazi party, and they're very convenient parties to sit with in the coalition. They'll vote with you whatever you want, as long as they get money for whatever they want, which is their yeshivot, their people continue controlling religion. And only now where you have our Ministry of Religious Affairs, he's still religious, but he's not ultra Orthodox, he's more modern. And only now you can see how these revolutions are happening. So a kosher certificate is not just this monster monopoly of the chief rabbinate. Restaurants can choose who they want to bring in to be their kosher certificate. Beautiful, very simple, and yet they're so afraid of it.
How large is the Knesset?
We have 120 Knesset members.
It seems that fear, it seems to me that from what you're saying and from what I'm hearing is fear has run Israel until now. Fear,
yes,
and fear will paralyze. And that's the attempt to paralyze people who believe what these other people want, to keep others in fear.
I completely agree with you. The fear of the politicians is that they won't have a coalition, that they won't be able to form a coalition, so they just give them what they want. The fear is that if you don't give them what they want, they'll go out and they will start a war or a terror or whatever, and people bow to them time after time. So when different sides are physically just marking women off, and the police says we can't do anything, it's not because they can't, it's simply because they don't want to. They don't want to start that war. They don't want to walk into that problem. Having a woman participate in public events, the Kotel, for instance, it has a few governmental ceremonies. One of them, the most famous one, is Memorial Day. And it's a ceremony that everyone's there. Every politician is there, and yet women cannot participate, and people are afraid to challenge the system. We tried a few times and people are just afraid. They're afraid to bring women in because it's gonna have the Kotel rabbi angry. It's gonna have the Haredi politicians angry. Okay, so they get angry. So what? So
So
you
what?
deal with it. So you deal with it, but they're afraid to deal with it, and it's not a way to run a country. Definitely not when you have 51% of the population women who are affected as well.
Maggie,
Yoshi,
did you have a question?
I have a question.
Marilyn?
Yes. When Golda Meir was the prime minister, was there still a problem for women? Considering she was a woman and I don't think she was super religious. So how was it then?
I honestly, I don't know. I tried to look into it, but I didn't find anything about it. I do want to see what's going to happen this year because you have a third of the ministers in the Knesset who are women. I do want to see if one of them can challenge the government, can challenge the system and say, no, we actually want to participate. We want to give a speech, or you know what, Hanukkah is coming up, and the government menorah, the ceremony, it happens at the men's section, and they invite the prime minister and they invite different men, of course, and figures. What's going to happen if, I don't know, the Ministry of Education, Minister of Education wants to join? She's a woman. Will he allow her? I have no clue. He usually will not invite women, of course, because again, they can't enter the men's section. But let's see if this, if we can challenge him again.
Maggie, did you have a question?
Yes, I was just going to ask if you feel hope because of this religion person who's not ultra-Orthodox.
I don't feel hope from his side. He has his own revolutions. The Kotel is not a part of it. But we do feel hope because Naftali Bennett, who's our current prime minister, Yair Lapid, who is the Ministry of, he's going to replace Naftali Bennett. I don't even remember who's who. We feel hope because we work closely with Nachman Shai, who's the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, and all of them say that we are a part of their agenda. So we feel hope, we see it. It's kind of like Moses who went to Mount Nebo and saw the promised land, but now we don't want to be Moses who never entered the promised land, right? We want to get there. We want to cut the core and we want to reach the Kotel agreement. So we feel hope, but as I said, I'm not naive, and I'm not going to lay back and say, okay, they promised us, they're probably working on it. There's a song in Israel saying, Al tagidu yom yavo haviu et hayom. Don't say a day will come, bring the day. So that's what, that's my job, to bring the day. That's our job.
Rabbi?
Well, and we are here to support you, Yochi, and realizing that. And I'll tell you what gives me hope too, in addition to the tremendous work that you're doing and all the folks there, is seeing those images that you share with us, those pictures of the women celebrating at the Kotel. That spirit is, I believe, will triumph over any fear. And by the way, I want us to remember that word for ultra-Orthodox in Israel, Haredi means fearful, and it's used in a positive connotation of fearing God, trembling before God. But I think fear is trembling before God and trembling before change and trembling before these things that they feel threatened by. So yeah, it's definitely, we know this is a struggle and we're here to support you in the struggle. Could you tell us, and thinking of those moving images of the women and the girls and the teens at the wall, a number of folks like had the talit over their head. Could you explain to everybody what that symbolized when we saw the talitot over the girls and the women's head, all like different talit, just like a sea of talit over the heads?
They were creating a chuppah.
The chuppah. And can you tell everybody the chuppah symbolized? What was the chuppah?
It was just part of our 25th anniversary, and we wanted to celebrate with having like a big chuppah over our heads, with a blessing to bless all of the women who joined us. It was just a beautiful moment.
Nice.
It was beautiful.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
So do you only go on Rosh Chodesh?
We mainly go on Rosh Chodesh. We also go, we have a Hanukkah event. We have Slichot at the Kotel, Purim. And we also, every once in a while, we go for just a prayer service on a regular Monday or regular Thursday, where no one knows that we're coming. We come unannounced. It's not published. And we come a small group, not a large group, like we come on Rosh Chodesh. And then the service goes by quietly, pleasant. No one knows to expect us. So our opposition is not there. No one yells at us. No one screams. And we're usually even able to just bring the Torah in because no one's looking for it. They're not searching for it. So it's a very simple, beautiful morning that we have when we come unannounced.
That's
Can
wonderful.
you continue to be unannounced and just unannounced?
No, because on everyone knows that we come on Rosh Chodesh. We want the crowd to come. We want our people to join as well. It's part of who we are. It's part of our sisterhood. So we can't just come as a small group. Oftentimes we have gap years or even just groups or women who join us that we don't even know about, that know, okay, Women of the Wall come on Rosh Chodesh. We join them. We don't know that they're coming. And that's part of the beauty. It's a curse and a blessing.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed, this is Heather, is that there are no female police people. Is that correct?
There are female policewomen, but even then, they do nothing to protect us. So
I
it doesn't
noticed that.
matter men or women. No one does anything to protect Women of the Wall. The police technically cannot interfere in anything that happens at the wall because it's not their territory. The rabbi of the Western Wall has his own security, and legally they are supposed to be in charge, but they don't want to do anything to protect us. So no one protects us there. It's part of our struggle. We demand that we be protected. There were some months that we had to hire private security guards, but it's expensive. It's expensive every month to come and say, okay, we're bringing 10 women who to surround us and protect us. But sometimes that's what we have to do.
You know, there's so much talk and hand wringing here about how the Taliban's taking over in Afghanistan. And yet you have your own homegrown Taliban right there. And
It's true.
It's frustrating.
It's sad and frustrating. It's not what my beloved country is supposed to be like.
Right.
No.
But that's what we're fighting. We're fighting to turn it into a country that we can call ours.
In the video, when the women were being escorted out and away, were they actually being arrested or were they just being made to leave?
So they were detained. No one was arrested overnight except for Anat Hoffman. They were released after 18 hours. The prison in Israel does not have enough space for criminals like Women of the Wall, but Anat was arrested.
Yeah. So does that mean, Yoshi, does that mean that they now have a record, have a criminal record?
Yes.
So does that apply for them getting jobs?
I don't think so. It's not a criminal record in the name of God. They never stole and anything. They haven't murdered. I don't think it affected a job search or something like that.
Okay.
And I think in Annette's case, it's it's just a reason to be proud.
Yes, except if it hampers a person's ability to live their life in a healthy way and be able to make any money.
Okay. Any other questions?
So,
Comments?
Don't see him.
So we thank you so much for coming and being
thank
with us.
you.
And we hope you'll come
Thank
again. And that, like you say, we hope we'll be able to meet you in Israel sooner than later.
Many, many.
And you're welcome. We welcome you to stay on. We actually are going